Hi and welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at some ideas around using the left hand and the right hand together. I'm going to be giving you some things to think about when deciding how you play your left hand depending on which kind of piece you're playing. Lots of different ways you can think about using the left hand. I like to think about using the left hand as the foundations for your piece. So if you think about like building a house, you want to think about your foundations being the strongest part. They will be what you're rooted to throughout your piece. So they'll lead the chords, they'll lead the feel of the piece, but they are what you're following all the way along, always coming back and helping you come back to the function of your piece or the chords that you're playing, but they also allow you to build your piece in a way that you want to build your music. So that's why it's important choosing the right kind of style for the left hand to mean that you can get what you want out of your piece. So when we're thinking about our left hand, it can get quite complicated. All I think we should worry about is getting back to that root of the chord. And the left hand can help take you on a journey to get there. So that's why you don't just have to use the same root notes as you're going through your chords. Otherwise that would be quite boring. Let me show you. So say I was going to play something like Easy by the Commodores. And I'm going to play it just using the root notes of the chord. So, in my left hand, you're looking here. So now's here where it might get a bit more complicated. You need to have some background knowledge on the chords that you're playing. So one of the techniques I used there was to walk the bass to the next root of the chord, or to notes within the chord that I'm already playing. So I want you to think about the triads that we might have learnt, or how to form triads, because those are really going to come in handy. You also need to think about the scale you're playing in and the chord scale that you are using. So for example, for this piece, I start off on the A flat, and then I'm going to walk my bass up to the C, because that's my next chord, C minor 7. So I'm going... It's the right amount of steps to walk up there, because it fits in with where I want it to come in the piece. And then I might just walk one step down. And then this is where we might change our chord. So you might see that in your music, you might see that the bass note is different to add some flair or to show that you're moving on to the next part. Here, I've also added an extra bass note here, but I'll explain more about why I'm doing that later. So let's see that again, focusing on the walking part. And obviously you can use this with loads of different styles of music as well, especially with 12-bar blues or some more ragtimey pieces. Let me show you now how we can use that in that style. So this is a good chance to explain how I'm using the chords that I'm playing to support the bass part that I'm using, and how I'm using those structures of the chord to move from one chord to the next chord. So let's just start with the basic part that we learned at the beginning, where we learned our C chord. So here's my C chord in the second inversion. Okay, and I'm putting the C in the bass to start this off. Simple. So now I'm using a pattern here that I can use throughout my piece, but I'm using walking bass between them to get to each chord. So I've used a G in the bass because I know that that makes up part of my chord. So I'm not playing a G chord here, because that's not what I want to add. That doesn't fit with what I want to do. But I'm adding the bass of the G to fill up my chord of C. And then my next chord is going to be E. But to walk from G to E is too far. So I need to think, well, what's my next closest part of the C chord that I can use to then walk up to the E? So that's my next closest note to get to the chord that I want to get to, unless I go down. So you've got to think how you want your piece to feel. And we can see that choice when we move to our next chord. So we're on the E. Now, it wouldn't make much sense to go back up here and move up to the A, which is going to be my next one. So, because my B is here, and I can just move here. And that also fits with the feel of what I want to play. So that's how I'm making that choice to move on. If we consider the end of that kind of little piece, that phrase we played there, we went from the G to the C. So what we were actually doing there was going from the fifth chord, the fifth, and resolving in the C. It just sounds nice. But to get there, I didn't just play. That would have been boring. So I used the walk pattern because that fitted with the rest of my piece. With some funky finger in there as well. So now let's have a think about broken chords and how we can use them to form the bass around our piece of music. Broken chords, I find, are the most useful thing that I can use when playing a piece. It doesn't matter whether you've already got a band behind you filling in, or you're playing solo, or you're playing accompanying for someone. Broken chords will always help you out, and that's why it's so important to know your chords before you start to play around with them. So let's have a think about C. Okay, if I was going to play a piece where I have going from, say, C to F, I'm thinking, well, my notes are C, E, and G. But if I'm already playing that in my right hand, I might just use the G here to almost fill up the chord. Imagine you're doing a painting, and you don't want the whole painting to be covered, because it just becomes a mess and horrible. You want to make sure that you're leaving gaps, leaving space for other things to be added later on or by other parts. So if we have a look here, if we're playing C, just the chord. I'm not using the E here because I don't want to. It opens that space. I've already got an E here. I don't need to make it even deeper by adding the E there. So what I'm doing there is breaking my chord up. Now what I might choose to do is do a pattern in this hand, in the left hand. Okay, that reminds me actually of the Adele piece, where she uses broken chords a lot. And what you can see there that I did was just, as I said when we started playing, I stripped it right back. I wanted the melody to be quite prominent in my right hand, so I just used the bass notes, and I might even support that as we get further into the piece, making it more intense by adding an octave below as well. And then I might choose to make it more intense, more fuller texture. So that's how you can use octaves in the bass to also add that intenseness to the piece. For example, when Adele starts basically shouting the chorus at the end. So we can also see that even John Williams is using broken chords when he's playing or when he's composed the theme for Han Solo and Princess Leia. So for example, we're starting with C as the chord. And he's just built the C chord up over here in the left hand. And then the next chord is A flat over C, so that's what he's done. And then D flat over C. Back to C. And he does it again. So broken chords are used throughout music. You can also think about how you might use the left hand to almost lead the piece of music, or creating a pattern or a riff that drives the piece, just like in Michael Jackson's Billie Jean. When you're using your left hand, you want to think about it as allowing your left hand to facilitate whatever your right hand wants to do. If your left and your right hand aren't working together, being led by your left hand, then your piece is likely not to work. You want to make sure that your left and your right hand are working together, but your left hand is the one that's driving your piece. It is the building blocks of what you want to make. You want to use your right hand to add the colour to your piece, to add the embellishments, and to give all the feel that you want to add to your piece. If you just use the left hand, it's quite likely that you could get confused between styles. You could pick up that and put it anywhere, depending on how you've written it, whereas the right hand is the one that's adding the you to the piece, or the flavour, the function to the piece, by adding in the chords, adding in the sevenths and diminished and things like that. That's what's making your piece the piece that it is. It also might be adding the melody or supporting it in a particular way. For example, like we looked at Adele, you wouldn't play the Adele with the ragtime because it just wouldn't work. So you're thinking about how you're using them both together. Now you can see in a minute that the right hand won't really do very much other than change the chord. The left hand stays the same. So if we have a think about something that doesn't work, we're going to think about John Williams' Imperial March. So that was nice because the bass was quite strong and in unison almost with the right hand. And the full chords were being used up here. If they could, I'm sure he'd add an extra note. So if I was going to play that slightly differently, maybe by using more of a rag kind of stride piano, it just wouldn't work. Just doesn't feel the same. You don't feel like there's an ominous Darth Vader coming to kill you. You might also want to think about how you can use broken chords or your bass notes to fill in some gaps while the right hand is holding notes or not really doing anything. Let's have a look again at how John Williams does this in the Force theme. I'll do it up here. So you can see there that the left hand was almost, although you had the really strong melody in the right hand that was powering its way through, being the theme, you had the left hand which was driving and connecting it all. And so on. Using the left hand in this way, I feel can drive the piece forwards as you've got this hearty oomph coming from the lower end of the piano while the right hand takes a step back. So another technique would be the one where you use the bass note to push itself off again onto the next one. So if we think about the piece, This Guy's in Love With You, I'll play it now and see if you can spot it. So what I'm doing in the bass hand is I'm not really using that many notes. I'm using the right hand to kind of lead the piece, but the left hand, although I wanted it to stay quite minimal, instead of just going, I'm jumping off again from that root of the chord. So, and then, and a lot of pieces use this. So I suppose you can then use that to build up from going from the leaping from the to then building up the stepping. Obviously, you might have to change the pattern slightly, as I did there, to make sure it fits. So I think that's as much as I can cover in one video. Let me know if there's anything else you want me to add or anything I can go over to make a bit more clear, or some things that you're wondering how you can use them, and that we can work together on to make a next video. So, thank you very much for joining, and I'll see you again next time.